Welcome to Reels on the Rocks, the show where your hosts Whiskey and Sweet Tea discuss film from the unpretentious perspective. It's Whiskey's favorite time of the year, Spooktober. So rinse off your knives and join us for Whiskey's killer Kinos. In tonight's episode, we will be discussing the schlockingly hilarious Evil Dead 2. Don't forget to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and as always, please be advised that spoilers are ahead.
Welcome back to Reels on the Rocks, everybody, the podcast where we don't have a problem. We can stop reviewing movies whenever we want. We just don't want to.
So
How are you doing, T?
I'm doing good, but what are we reviewing this week? What is it, Resident Evil 2? Is that what it is?
I hate you. Please tell me you watched the right movie. It's Evil Dead 2.
Yes, I did, but I prepared that in advance because I knew that would irritate you.
So I imagine some of you listening are horror fans, and this episode's been... T confused Resident Evil with Evil Dead, and so I was worried
multiple times.
I was worried that you were going to watch... I think the second one's called Resident Evil Redemption, or I don't know. Those movies might be worth talking about in the future. They're certainly a beast of their own, but I'm glad you watched the right movie.
Oh my god,
and
it
that
was
also
an adventure.
Clears up
it was an adventure trying to get this watched.
Right. And that also clears up what we're watching. What was an adventure about it? Was it hard to find streaming?
That's what was weird, because I spent 3 days trying to get this on Amazon, and because every time I tried to rent it, it would say there was some sort of error, but only purchasing this rentals. I had no idea what was going on. I was trying to find it other places, and eventually I finally settled on having to reset my Apple password so I could rent it on Apple. I actually ended up buying it just because it was $1 more.
I'm gonna repeat what I said during the King of Comedy to anyone listening. If you like a movie, buy a physical copy, because
Yes.
It makes it a whole lot easier if you feel like watching it. Because as convenient as Amazon and Apple and all these are, it's if it's not streaming anywhere. I mean, I guess you could get a VPN. That's the other workaround. But if you're not into I don't know. VPNs are pretty cheap. Whatever. Buy physical copies.
We're not sponsoring VPNs like every other YouTuber right now, though. I promise.
We should. If someone wants to sponsor us, I wouldn't say no. Nord Express, Surfshark, Dashlane, anybody? Surfshark's the one I would hope for because they sound the coolest. I know Nord and Express are probably better, but I don't know. Surfshark sounds cool. But anyway, what are you drinking? You've been coming in clutch with the cocktails this season. I've been listening to some. I forgot how cool some of your weird gin cocktails are that you've been making.
Okay, so because this had the most random ending I have ever seen, I decided to pick the most random and unthinkable drink I would ever pick. Water. I hope that's not a letdown for you.
I mean, I don't really care. It might be a letdown for the viewers, especially again. You've been doing some cool cocktails the last few episodes.
But I did get a berry LaCroix, and I did add red food coloring to it, so it looks like half the special effects in the movie.
It's gonna look like you've been drinking some Kool-Aid.
Oh,
well,
okay.
I was the lame duck last episode because all I could find. I mean, it was nice for me, nice nostalgic Sam Adams. Mini rant, when I was going just doing some grocery shopping the other day, now they have all the Sam Adams October stuff. So I don't know why they didn't last time I went in, but now it's all over there. It's on sale and whatever. But I was planning on doing a cider for this episode because that's another drink I consider to be very October-ish. And I happened upon my favorite cider brand, Ace, doing a pumpkin cider. So I've never had a pumpkin cider.
Oh my
I don't know
god,
if
you like Ace cider?
It's my favorite.
Oh my god. When I was in Savannah last year, there was a bar, and I forget what it was called, but it was also featured in that movie Something to Talk About. But anyway, they had on tap Ace pear cider, and I fell in love with it. And I couldn't find it anywhere, and I finally found it just a couple months ago at the bougie grocery store in town. So I was very, very excited about that. I was sipping on that with dinner tonight. That's wild.
Bevmo carries it regularly. I will not necessarily talk up Bevmo because they used to be awesome. I don't know what happened, but I don't think
usually kind of here.
And I happened to get this at Bevmo because I knew that they had a good cider selection. But yeah, so I don't know if this is pumpkin flavoring or if they actually used a pumpkin to make cider, but I'm excited to try this.
They used white girl tears.
Right. The whitest of
the
white
whitest
girls.
ciders.
Actually, it's funny. A white girl rung me up and she was kind of like, oh, like I'm intrigued. And I'm like, oh, are you a pumpkin spice fan? So it's such a... white women everywhere swooning for October. But yeah, what the heck? I'm going to take a sip now. It's really good. I think that's flavoring, though. It's only like it literally tastes like their regular cider, but with like a pumpkin spice flavoring, which isn't bad. I doubt that it's like pumpkin made. So anyway, without further ado, we're talking about Evil Dead 2. Accidental rhyme. So, getting the boring stuff out of the way, this came out on March 13th, 1987, which... March, not a great time to release a spooky movie, but it did come out on a Friday the 13th.
Yeah.
So it's got that going for it. Directed by Sam Raimi, written by Sam Raimi and Scott Spiegel. Its budget was an estimated $3.6 million and grossed $5.9 million.
Okay.
I had to double check that wasn't a 4. But we'll do a little back and forth. I am right off the bat. Part of the reason I picked this one is I feel like it was in our first year of doing this show, but I remembered you saying that horror comedies do not work, and that I wanted to talk about this movie because it's one of my favorites. But I kept that in the back of my mind because I'm like, okay, I'm gonna particularly bring that up when we see this or some other horror comedy because I'm curious how just first impressions. How did you feel about this one?
This has to be the dumbest movie I've ever seen, but I mean that in the way it's supposed to be taken. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, that's why I didn't get upset when you said that. It's intentionally like. So this is an interesting series, especially coming after Poltergeist, because there's quite a few parallels I hadn't even really considered when we chose these movies.
Mm-hmm.
And one is I talked about in our last episode how Poltergeist was the most just all over the place franchise. And I will say, like, because you don't know, obviously you know nothing about this because you thought it was Resident Evil. But so the thing to know about this is Sam Raimi. Do you know much about Sam Raimi? Like, can you even name something he's directed?
I can't, but I do know the name. I have heard the name before.
You're gonna immediately. So he got famous. Well, he's been famous for a while, but like he got mainstream famous for directing the original Spider-Man trilogy.
Okay.
So he and the lead actor Bruce Campbell and the producer Rob Tappert are childhood best friends from Michigan, or maybe teen best friends. They grew up together to some extent, and they made like home movies together, and they grew up and had aspirations of going to Hollywood together. And with Bruce being the lead man every time, with Sam directing, and with Rob being the producer. And it's interesting because first off, I'll say this. I bet you wouldn't be able to guess Sam Raimi's favorite movie of all time.
Winnie the Pooh and the Blustery Day.
You're not entirely that far off. It's The Wizard of Oz.
Oh my God, I should have guessed that. Because that's like everybody like who's done fantasy and horror, they always list that as one of their favorite movies.
And he kind of got his dream to come true. He got to that Disney movie, Oz the Great and Powerful, back in 2011. He directed that as well.
Oh, okay, yeah, right. That would have been like a dream project.
And it was okay. It's funny, fans of this series said it's basically Army of Darkness, but in Oz. And that's kind of a hilariously accurate description of the movie. And you haven't seen, we'll talk more about Army of Darkness going into it. But yeah, so he grew up with them, and they kind of essentially came together, and they're like, we need to get our foot in the door in Hollywood. And the easiest way to do that, as I've talked about on some of the other horror movies we've reviewed, is to do a horror movie.
Yeah.
So they got together, they made Evil Dead 1, and the thing about that one is that it's intended to be like a straight horror movie.
Mm-hmm.
But because it was done so kind of cheaply and amateurly,
it's kind of hilarious.
It was a nightmare shoot. And sort of, it's definitely unintentionally funny, but like it blew up. It got really famous, and one thing that also kind of helped it was that it was banned. It got like an adult rating. A lot of theaters wouldn't show it, but they used that to their benefit. Like, oh, this movie's too intense for you.
Yeah.
Or whatever. Like, which it kind of maybe at the time. I would count its success on a few things. One, the fact that it wasn't a slasher movie. I think that was probably kind of refreshing for the audience at the time.
I can see that.
And also, despite the effects being kind of cheap, there's sort of, and it goes with this one too, like obviously you can tell they leaned into that, but I do think that there's sort of a charm to the first Evil Dead.
Mm-hmm.
Which leads me into why we're doing the second one, because I'm sure you thought that was weird before seeing the movie. The thing about it is that this is essentially a remake of the first one, but done silly. Like, so you do not need to know anything about the first movie, because ostensibly this is the first movie as far as the series goes. They got this, then they did Army of Darkness, which Universal picked up, which is a whole funny thing with that. Like, I'm sure... So I have the first and second on Blu-ray, and the reason I don't have Army of Darkness yet is it's sold separately by Universal, and they sell it at like a normal Blu-ray price. So it's like getting Army of Darkness, like a special edition or whatever, would basically be like buying the first two movies twice. And because of that too, that is also why it's called Army of Darkness, because they wanted like no association with Evil Dead 2. They essentially wanted this to be like, or that, not the movie we're reviewing, to be kind of like, oh, people like this. Let's do it with a big budget.
Yeah.
And have this epic story. And we're not going to call it Evil Dead 3. We're going to call it Army of Darkness. It's its own thing. And it does kind of work, but it's very quirky, especially when you're trying to buy it, because I'm sure a lot of people are like, well, why can't I get all three movies? Because Universal specifically owns Army of Darkness, and they make it like you have to get it by itself.
I mean, that kind of makes sense. It's like Universal owns Serenity, but Fox owns Firefly.
Yeah, exactly. Just honestly pretty much like that. Because, yeah, that was a weird thing. I remember that, too. When the Serenity movie came out, Universal, I think, was the one who put it out.
Yeah, they were.
And I remember, because I hadn't heard of Firefly when the movie came out. And then when I saw Firefly, I was like, wait, Fox? How does that work? Yeah, so it's same deal. And I think that's also because, you know, Fox had no faith in that IP, essentially. So, which is weird, because that's not really what happened with this. It was like, because this movie did so well, Universal thought they'd do really well with Evil Dead. Whatever.
Yeah.
But the thing is, like, this is more or less the first one. Like, if you want to watch Evil Dead 1, it's fine. It takes itself seriously, but it is still kind of unintentionally funny. But if you care about like the franchise going forward, this is the starting point. This is the version of Ash that is the hero of all of the, you know, this next movie and the TV series that started in 2016 and I guess ended in 2018.
Yeah. Which
I finally got the chance to binge earlier this year. I think it was on Netflix, and I finally got to finish it. And if anyone cares what I think, I thought it was solid. Like, if you like the Evil Dead franchise, the TV show is great.
Whiskey thought it was trash. No, I'm just kidding.
No, I mean, like, that's the thing. Like, to do this justice, you don't really need much. You need Bruce Campbell, because he's kind of a lot of the charisma in all of the movies and stuff. And otherwise, like, you can be as goofy as you want. You don't need to spend money on, like, cutting-edge special effects or anything. Like, it just needs to have Ash with his chainsaw arm kicking butt. But so the other thing, and I'm sure I've kind of revealed it, but this was intentionally made to be funny. Like, you know, it's considered a horror comedy. In the bonus material I was looking at, one of the people who worked on it called it a funhouse movie. Like, oh, you get scared, and then, oh, you laugh, and then you get scared again. Like, so that's the term he used to describe the movie. I thought that was kind of neat.
I just loved, one of the things I loved about this was how just, and I hate to say the term over the top, because...
No, you're, again... Go for it, because everyone knows already. And again, it was intentional. Like, that's kind of the thing is, it
Well,
is stupid and it is over the top.
To me, over the top is like it is like to the point where it's overkill. Like this is not overkill. It's like just the right amount of leaning into the hokiness and the in the campiness and everything. And if you have any doubt of whether this was intentional or not, I think if you have any question about it, when you see the scene where he puts the Farewell to Arms book on top of the bucket, I mean, I'm like, at that point, if you still think this is a serious movie, you clearly are not paying attention.
I'm so glad you noticed that. Even when I was watching it the other night, I was like, I wonder if T is going to see that and realize that, like, that going into this episode, I was wondering what your reaction was going to be, if you were going to realize that it was intended to be funny or what. So I'm glad you picked up on the jokes, because it's.
And then like the bridge, when the classic, oh, they can't get back because like it's a lot of like horror movie tropes. And I don't know if this is before or after the establishment. Slasher tropes, I guess, before or after the establishment of the slasher genres.
It was in the midst of it. There was a giant hiatus between Evil Dead. Evil Dead 1 came out in either 1980 or 1981, and then this one came out in 1987. So like Sam Raimi had already tried to make some other like Hollywood movies, but the studio kind of kept taking control. And same thing with Bruce Campbell and everybody had like gone off, tried working on some other movies. And they were like, you know what? Let's do Evil Dead again. Like it did really well. Let's do it again, but let's make it stupid. And the over the top thing actually kind of leads me into another one of my fun facts is Sam Raimi is also a giant fan of the Three Stooges.
Yep, I could see that. I could definitely see that in this.
He intentionally put some Stooge gags in this, and I wrote them down. And also with Sam, Bruce, and Rob, I actually in my notes called them the Three Stooges because I thought that was funny. There's three of them, and they childhood friends and stuff. But so the one that is in this movie is the eyeball gag, where the eyeball pops out and lands in the girl's mouth. That's from a Three Stooges bit, but it was like with salad and like an olive or something.
Yeah.
Three Stooges.
I can see that.
But that's straight up a Three Stooges gag. And then the other one that I remember specifically, and I thought was in this movie, but I think it was actually in Evil Dead 1, despite it being a serious movie, they did a Three Stooges gag. It's a light bulb in the basement fills up with blood, and it's from an episode of the Three Stooges where they're plumbers and the light bulbs fill up with water.
I don't think I saw the light bulb filling up with blood.
As I said, it wasn't in this one. It was in Evil Dead 1.
Oh, it was in the first one. It was in
the first one. I just thought it was in this one, so when I was watching, I'm like, oh, I guess it must have been in the next one. And there might have been some more. Also, Bruce Campbell did all of his own stunts. So when he's like bashing his head with plates and stuff like that, and he's flipping himself over with his hand, he's really doing that. He did have a stunt double for some things, but a lot of the physical comedy he did. I think he's really good at it. Like it's funny. Like Sam really wanted him to be like a leading man, but Hollywood just no one ever wanted to cast him in the lead except in this series. And I think that's actually kind of tragic. I feel bad for,
because I told my mom when I was watching this, I was like, I mean, he's kind of handsome and he's obviously talented because, I mean, he was doing very, very well in this comedic role. And as you've heard actors say, comedy is very, very hard to play. And he was doing it perfectly. So I'm like, he obviously has talent. He's handsome. I seriously do want to know why nobody would cast him in anything.
It's interesting. Like, I don't know either, but it is cool that throughout his career, Sam continued to cast him in all of his movies, or most of his movies. He loves having Bruce cameo in his movies. If you ever played the Spider-Man 2 video game, he didn't make the game, but Bruce Campbell does the tutorial voiceover. So if you're playing the game and learning how to play, Bruce Campbell's the one telling you how to do things. And in Spider-Man 2, did you see Spider-Man 2?
A long time ago, but yes.
If you remember the scene where they're trying to get the arms off of Dr. Octopus in the surgery room and the arms attack everybody, the surgeon, he's wearing a mask, but the surgeon who brings out the saw, that's Bruce Campbell.
Oh, that's a great reference then.
Yeah, there's so many. The other funny thing that Sam does I don't think it was in all of his movies. For some of the movies they couldn't get it in, but so the car that they drive to the cabin,
Yeah.
He tries to put that in all of his movies.
You mean after they throw the car out of the sky?
Well, if you noticed, the car got sucked into the vortex as well. So when he gets,
Well, yeah.
when Army of Darkness happens, so that's where its cameo is in there. It's in the Spider-Man movies. It's in like I'm sure someone has written exactly where all the cameos are, but he has taken that very same Evil Dead car. And I showed you that trailer for the Evil Dead remake that came out in like 2013.
Yes, I did watch that.
They did use the same car as like a homage, even though Sam Raimi didn't have anything to do with that other than signing off on them making the remake. They did have the Evil Dead car in the movie.
That's pretty funny. Although I was kind of just like, that movie looked like it's supposed to be taken seriously, so I was kind of just like, just watching it.
Honestly, so I still haven't seen it. I need to, and everyone who knows, Whiskey's the horror fan. I know I should have seen it by now. It was good. Critics liked it, and it looks good. Because the thing is, like, as I said, the first one was taken seriously, so them doing like a serious remake of that, I'm okay with, because the rest of the series is goofy, and it kind of, you can't really remake it unless it would just come off as like a cheap ripoff, honestly. Like, either you would be playing too similarly to the original, or you'd try to be, it just wouldn't work. Like, even with the best intentions, like trying to redo the whole franchise of Evil Dead, I don't think it would work. But remaking the first one is like a serious horror movie. Apparently it was very good, even though I haven't seen it and I do want to see it. It was good, and I thought when I saw the trailer, I'm like, oh, this might be a good idea.
I was when I was talking about to my mom about watching this, she was like, oh, it kind of sounds like it's going to be sort of in the same vein as I forget, what did she call it? It's something in Dale versus Evil.
Tucker and Dale versus Evil.
Yes, which I saw.
That's another one I was thinking of possibly reviewing on this show. So
okay.
If you haven't seen it,
so I read the parents' guide, and it's extremely graphic. So
it's also funny though.
I know it's completely funny, but it's a lot more like because I know people call this movie, like, they say this movie's kind of gory, and I'm just like, it is and it isn't. Like, I don't know, because it's like 80s effects and it's schlocky, it doesn't come across to me as gory, even though I guess it technically is. Does that make sense?
And the thing is, like, better effects existed when this movie came out. They intentionally did it again, like everything they leaned into, because they knew, like, hey, if we don't make it like too crazy, like, it won't be as expensive to make. We can make it a little cheap and make it funny on purpose. And fun fact, with this being a horror comedy and with the type of comedy they're doing, like, Three Stooges gags, this is actually, like, in the horror community labeled under the subgenre splatstick, because it's like gore slapstick. So splatstick. So I always thought that was funny. I learned that when I was in high school, but like, I just thought I'd make a note of that.
Oh, and I forgot. There were some questions I had about it, but I would say it was very, very enjoyable though. And it was kind of funny. Like, from the very beginning, it was kind of already hilarious. It was like this, over the top mythology. And then we had the obvious girlfriend dancing in her panties again. We just had,
and with the mythology, that was the other thing I thought was kind of interesting with last episode, is I was talking about how they didn't go into a lot of explanation with Poltergeist, and that made it very mysterious and spooky.
Yeah.
And in this, it's like the opposite, because it just right off the bat, the what is it? The Necronomicon Ex Mortis, inked with the blood of sea of men, or blah, 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 like, and it's this whole thing, like, talking about the thing, it can resurrect demons or whatever. And it kind of, like, you can explain things and still have a spooky movie, but this kind of goes with what I was talking about in the last episode, where if you over-explain things, it kind of ruins the spookiness.
Yeah, and I think that, like you said, that was intentional.
Yes, and also, although they did actually have a very similar intro in the first movie, but again, it's like, it kind of, by ruining the mystery, it sort of plays up the goofiness, and having the stop motion book with, like, the pages getting inked and all that stuff, it feels almost like something out of, like, a fantasy movie, but also like very theatrical and stuff.
Well, I would say, speaking of stop motion, that whole sequence where the corpse reanimates and it kind of like dances around and plays with its head. That reminded me a lot of Beetlejuice. That whole sequence just looked like
Yes.
something straight out of Beetlejuice.
Yes. They used the same camera Ray Harryhausen used, and it was, they pretty much did all of that stuff in a studio in like Burbank or North Hollywood somewhere.
Yeah.
Like the film itself was shot in North Carolina, which got a fun anecdote about that for later. But yeah, like it was just small team of a couple of people. Different people did different animation things. Like the guy who did the book, he was actually hand drawing like as he animated, and then like he had some stuff ready to go like for the later part of the book where the pages start flipping faster and things like that. Honestly, a lot of the behind the scenes stuff for this was really interesting. And I might as well get into it now. So the first Evil Dead movie was a horrible shoot. It was very grueling. A lot of people got very sick.
Ew.
They shot in the winter, I think in Michigan. So it was like freezing cold. Like a bunch of them were like literally they actually did find like an abandoned cabin for that one and like shot in it and pretty much like camped in it when they weren't shooting, and it was just a miserable experience.
Right.
This was actually quite a nice experience. It was very kind of refreshing. Maybe I'll send. I found some of the bonus material on YouTube, and I might send it to you because it might warm your heart a little bit. But it was pretty much like summer camp. It was shot in 9 weeks over the summer of 1986. They shot in, let's see, Wilmington, North Carolina, or somewhere close, probably, because one of the people said that they were like really out in the middle of nowhere. To the point where there was actually still segregation going on in 1986. God. Yeah, the guy was like, yeah, so we went to this laundromat and it was like all these black people, and they were like, no, the white laundromat's over that way. And they were kind of like telling them to get out.
Yeah.
And then they went to the white laundromat and it was way nicer, and it was, yeah. So apparently that was happening. But yeah, they rented a house. A bunch of them like camped out. During like breaks and stuff, they had a bunch of water guns that they would like have water gun fights and stuff. A lot of the actresses were like brand new to the industry, and they seemed to be having a really good time. The girl who gets dragged off by the tree actually continued working in soap operas afterwards, so she had like a working career. Also, Bruce Campbell and the leading woman both had little kids at the time, and their kids would visit them on set, and they like kind of bonded on that. And it was funny because Bruce's kids were like not fazed by any of the scary makeup or anything, but the woman's kids were like really freaked out. It was funny. Bruce talking about it, he's like, "Oh yeah, I just tell my kids, oh yeah, that's Ted in the pig suit," which is what they were talking about, the Henrietta suit. Like, oh yeah, Ted's just in the pig suit. But yeah, it was like a really fun, like it was still difficult. Like it was super hot. Like even when they weren't shooting, it was like they just,
well, it's North Carolina. Like, what did you expect?
Exactly. Well, and that too, like I mentioned Bruce and, Rob Tappert. Another person that Sam likes to have in his movies is his little brother, Ted Raimi. And Ted Raimi plays Henrietta in the movie, or at least the scary witch version of Henrietta. And he like, it was pretty brutal. Like in fact, in the bonus material, it was funny. He was like, I don't know how I could do that stuff. I guess it's because I was like 20 years old, but it's like thinking like they showed in the footage, like when they took the suit off of him, it would just be buckets of sweat.
Oh God.
And the other little quirky thing is the contact lenses that they wore in the making of this film didn't have holes in the irises. So whenever the actors had them in, they were basically blind.
Oh, that's nice.
They rehearsed with them out, and then they would do it. You know, they had everyone. No one got seriously hurt or anything. But my God, Ted Raimi, what a trooper! Because imagine you're blind and you're trapped in a latex like suit.
Right.
Not
yeah.
latex, but you know what I mean.
No.
Like,
Yeah. It's just a giant thing on you, basically.
I would have had a panic attack like 10 minutes into having that thing on me, especially with the contact lenses and not being able to see anything on top of it. Like, ugh. So what a trooper. And it was funny. Like,
I would start whispering behind you just to make you paranoid too.
Right. But yeah, like it was a big fun time. Like everyone had like a really good experience on this set, despite it being still a very like hard shoot. Like it seemed like summer camp. Mark Shostrom. He was one of the effects guys, and he has a connection to one of our past episodes. He
Ooh.
worked on Nightmare on Elm Street 2.
Oh, that's right. The homoerotic one.
The very gay Freddy Krueger movie. So he did the effects on that one, and he was a big fan of the first Evil Dead. So when he heard that they were doing Evil Dead 2, he like sent all of his like pictures of his work on Nightmare 2 to the production, and they hired him. But he was like a big joker. He was the one who had all the water guns. So like, and they would like constantly do like pranks and stuff.
One of the things that I just kept like one of the things that I thought was hilarious, and it's I really didn't realize I'd seen scenes from this before, and I just didn't realize where it was from. Particularly the one where he looks for the chainsaw and the chainsaw's not there, but the outline is. I remember seeing that. But one of the things I liked about this is it was funny. It was in the horror theme, but one of the things I really enjoyed about this was the fact that even though, it was kind of bloody and stuff, it was also at the same time very restrained. Like it wasn't into this is hard to explain. It's like it wasn't into excess. It was into being over the top, but not being excessive, if that makes any sense at all.
It was over the top to a comical, like, so for instance, the scene with the chainsaw, that's like out of a cartoon. The idea that there would be a chalk outline of a chainsaw where it's supposed to be. Or even like when he shoots his hand through the wall and just a geyser of blood comes out. Like that's just so absurd that I'd say 9 out of 10 dentists would laugh at that.
What's wrong with the 10th one?
He's a sociopath. No,
apparently.
No, but like that's the thing. Like when it was like violent or gory, it was part of it was that the effects kind of lessened it, because you could tell it was like a dummy or something. Yeah. And then it was just so over the top that it became a cartoon. Like I love the term splatstick because that's such a good term for what it is. Because it does feel like a Three Stooges thing, but like horror themed, Like instead of getting your eyes poked out, they get gouged out, but it's still, and that too, like if you paid attention to the sound design, they had goofy sound effects.
There was that scene, and I forget who it is. I don't know if it's when the rest of the party shows up and he's already shot through the door and he grazed that guy's girlfriend. And I think they're like fist fighting, and it's like, because I had my headphones because I was watching this on my phone, and it was just like, I'm like, this is like the most like phoned in like punching sounds ever, because like you said, it was supposed to be like campy and kind of ridiculous,
right?
I remember that specifically.
Well, while you were talking about that, I did look through my notes, and the name I was trying to think of was Greg Nicotero. He was one of the effects guys, and he's the one to thank for all of the amazing like bonus footage. He like, I guess on like a Super 8 home video camera or something, but he filmed all the behind the scenes stuff, and so there's like just tons of really like good, like I said, I'll send them to you after we record because it's very heartwarming. It looks like a like summer camp or something. It's very cute. And also the other kind of quirky thing is when they were in North Carolina, they set up shop in, I guess it was an abandoned high school, but like all of the interior cabin stuff was built on a set in the high school gymnasium.
Oh my God. How did that not echo like crazy?
Well, I mean, like when you put up like sound blankets and stuff, like I'm sure they soundproofed it. Like they had to build a set inside, so I'm sure that took up some of it. And then I'm sure they did this on purpose because of how funny it is. But the effects workshop that they set up was in the high school's science lab. So
literally back there, mad scientist things going on.
Yeah, a bunch of like Hollywood types just squatting in a high school in North Carolina having water gun fights and making a spooky movie.
I mean, is that not the dream? It
looked like a lot of fun. I wish I could go back in time and work on this movie. It was like, as I said, I'll send you some stuff. But yes, anything else that struck you about this?
My big question is, what happened to the dad who was doing the research? Where did he go, or where did he disappear to, or
I think that they are trying to insinuate that Henrietta probably killed him.
Well, he says on the tape recording, Henrietta tried to kill me, therefore I buried her in the basement. But if she actually did kill him, where's his body and why didn't it reanimate?
Well, so, and this is probably like my only real complaint with the series in general is one thing with fantasy or horror, you got to be very specific with the rules. And the rules for what, when, and how you get possessed in these movies is kind of all over the place. Like, and it's almost like whenever the script needs something to happen, like someone will just randomly get possessed by a deadite. And it works partly because it's just a silly movie, but it feels kind of lazy sometimes. And that's one of those things where I'm pretty sure because one thing you kind of get from this movie, they cut down on some of the more violent stuff I found out in the bonus features. But one thing about these types of demons is once they've animated your body, you kind of get it with his dead girlfriend that he, took her head off with a shovel. But even when you dismember the bodies, they stay alive. So, like, I'm guessing he died because he said, I had to kill Henrietta and I buried her in the basement. So I'm guessing he thought that was that and didn't realize that she could still just pop out of the ground and kill him anyway. So I'm guessing that's what happened. I having seen the entire series, unless I'm forgetting something from the TV show, you never really find out definitively what happened to him. But I would just guess that she probably killed him.
Well, and then the other thing that I had a question
or
about,
he got possessed. I don't know. Maybe he's out running around the woods or something.
He's out possessing the gas station down the street.
Right.
The other question is, so if that was the case, I was under the impression that everything started up this time because he played that tape recorder. And, they heard and then the evil was unleashed. So how did they get the evil to go back and, like, how did they get Pandora's box to go back inside of itself essentially the first time?
See, and that's what I mean, where I feel like part of it is they're just not taking the story very seriously because they're making a silly movie. But that's a good point. That's something I always thought about too, is it's like, okay, why weren't the demons already present when they got there? Like, why are they waiting until they play a recording of him saying it? Because he already said it, right? And obviously he disappeared or died or was possessed or something. So why would he, wouldn't it already be Crazy Town in that cabin? Like, why would they need to read it again? And I don't have a good answer for that. Again, I don't think, and it was the setup was exactly the same in the first Evil Dead too. So all of that could be, carried over from the first movie,
right?
Criticism, because it's the same thing. I don't think that he was there with his wife, but in the first movie, it was some archaeologist or whatever studying the book, and he, there's a recording of it, and he reads it out loud. But yeah, valid questions. I don't have an answer for you because the next movie takes place in the Middle Ages, so they never really return to that.
One of the things I did like about this movie, and this is kind of like, even though it was kind of, a little gruesome, but we've talked about why it really wasn't. But the reason why about the character deaths didn't bother me is because they didn't give us enough time to even care about any of them. It's kind of like they immediately appear. And then it's like, well, seconds, like we don't get a backstory. We don't see their lives really outside of this world. We don't see any of that.
I completely agree. Also, they're kind of, with the sense of this being a cartoon, even Ash is a bit of a cartoon character. Like, that's part of the reason I don't think you're as emotionally attached is you've got the dumb redneck, you've got the dumb redneck girlfriend, you've got the...
Well, the dumb redneck, I did feel a little sad for just because he seemed to actually care about his girlfriend.
True, but then he held everyone at gunpoint.
Well, yeah, because he wanted to get her back. I mean, come on, I'm a sucker for love.
True.
And then I knew from like the beginning of the movie, I knew somebody is going to get shot or stabbed accidentally. And it wasn't until like almost the end of the movie, but I'm like, this is going to happen at some point. Something happened and I forget what it was in the movie, but I'm like, that's going to be a joke at some point. Somebody is going to get accidentally shot or stabbed or something like that. And it finally happened.
Basically. Yeah. But that's what I mean. Like all the characters, like even the boyfriend or whatever is like the first one to get possessed. And it's like, what could you really tell about his character is like, he was dating the daughter of this archaeologist or whatever. So as you said, it's like you don't really get to know them very much. So when they get picked off, probably the only one who really gets a lot of emotional anguish that you might kind of feel bad for is Ash, because like the whole first third of the movie is almost like a mini horror movie in itself with his girlfriend and all of that.
You bad, but you still don't know enough about him though, because like everything starts immediately. I did like the scene though, and I thought that was pretty funny when his reflection comes out and talks to him, and he's like, "Really? Are we really doing okay? You just dismembered your girlfriend. Are you sure we're doing okay?"
He's so good at that. An evil Ash is like a thing in the whole series. Like in Army of Darkness, there's a whole physical evil embodiment of him that's leading the army of the dead. So he's very good at playing like a good and evil version of himself. That comes back very frequently in the series. As I said, like part of the reason this works is Bruce Campbell and his like charismatic performance. And fun fact, by the way, the final season of the Evil Dead show was not ended because anyone lost any interest. It's because Bruce Campbell was so sick of playing Ash.
He was like, I've been playing this for like 30 years. Like, let me do literally anything else.
Well, and like I remember when the final season came out, watching like, I forget, it was like Vanity Fair or Wired or something. He did like an interview where, you know, like asking questions or AMAs or something. And he was pretty much like, he was sick of playing Ash, and the character was just kind of like this dumb American stereotype. He was kind of over at that point.
Yeah.
Like, and this, like, he was like 50 years old. So he was just like, and frankly, like, honestly, the way the show ended at that point, they revealed Ash had like a teen daughter, and it's like, I would still be down for more Evil Dead stuff, but like, just make her the main character.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, they've done that before with other shows. I've seen them do that with other shows. It's like pass it on, pass the baton or whatever.
Maybe they will. I don't know. Like, it's kind of one of those where, like, if Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell aren't involved in some way, then it's probably not going to take off. But I do think it could.
I just feel bad for Bruce Campbell because, like I said, that dude clearly has some talent, and he never got a chance to really kind of like leave.
It's very weird, especially like now. A lot of people, he's a big star because of this series and other things with like certain like nerdy communities. And everyone feels the same way. It's like, you know, he was very charismatic. He was very like handsome for this movie. Like when in his off time, he was like lifting weights and stuff to keep that kind of like Hollywood masculine man physique and stuff. And it is interesting that they just really didn't want to like cast him in the lead in anything. Like no matter how many times Sam tried to, like for instance, he did like sort of a superhero movie in the early 90s, Darkman. I don't know if you've heard of the film, but I believe he wanted Bruce to be the lead in that, and they said no. And then they ended up casting, what's his name from Taken?
Liam Neeson.
Thank you. Yeah, and then which is weirder because at that point Liam Neeson wasn't even like a famous actor, so it's like you're not going to cast Bruce, but you're going to cast whatever. It's interesting, and people talk about it a lot too because it is so odd that there was so much pushback for that kind of decision, because I think he would have been great.
Dude, I just looked up a picture of him. He still looks very handsome today. Like this dude. He's a good looking guy. He really should. He needs to be picked. I feel bad that he never got leading man status, but somehow Chris Pratt did.
Yeah, dude. Oh my God. If they made an Evil Dead remake at this point, I feel like that's who starring Chris Pratt as Ash. Fun fact, by the way, I don't know if you caught this, but Ash, his actual name in the series is Ashley. Like it is a man named Ashley with a chainsaw arm.
Well, I mean, come on. What is my favorite movie?
Is there an Ashley in the Gone with the Wind?
Yes, Ashley Wilkes. That's the guy she pines after the entire movie.
Oh, that's right. I forgot that his name was Ashley. There you go. It's like the one other example. Again, like for me, this was a movie I watched a lot as a teenager, and I always thought that was kind of quirky and funny because I never thought a man could be named Ashley. So it's like, you know, going against gender norms. You got a man named Ashley with a chainsaw arm.
I thought that chainsaw arm was like the most ridiculously hilarious and fabulous thing at the same time. Like, I don't know, something about it was just very, very like fabulous. Like, I'm surprised I don't know why, but I was like, why isn't there a drag queen who does like the chainsaw arm? Like, something about it was just fabulous, and I don't know what it was, but it was great. I love the parts though when towards the end fight when he's hitting, I guess, Henrietta over the head with the thing, and then the because it's not a real chainsaw, so the chainsaw blade is just wobbling back and forth. That was hilarious to me. This was a very, very solid comedy. I didn't expect to laugh as much as I did. Because I've seen comedies where I've been like, oh, this is funny, but I'm not laughing. I don't know if you know what I mean when there's those comedies like that where it's funny, but I'm not laughing out loud.
I mean, that's kind of how I felt about Ruthless People. Again, like I said it in our review, it's like, this is funny, this is a joke, and I can see it's a joke, and I see where the joke is. Not making me laugh though. See, although it got close a few times, like with the bit with the SWAT team and stuff like that. But yeah, that's how I felt. That's like what I said in that review. So I know what you mean. And I'm very pleased to hear you say all that, because again, this part of this review is having you eat your words, because 2 years or however long ago it was when you said, and it's probably still in one of our old episodes, but I remember you saying oh, horror comedies don't work. I'm like, I'm remembering you said that, because I'm gonna make you disagree with yourself in the future. So I'm glad you found this funny. I actually think, and maybe it'll be ruining it if we decide to do a review in the future, but I personally think you might even like Army of Darkness more because there's less gore. Because it was Universal, they wanted a PG-13 rating for that one. So because of that, it's very much more like goofy comedy. My opinion of that movie is I like this one better because it's just a little bit darker as far as the jokes go. Mm-hmm. But Army of Darkness is still very good. And the effects are way better. Like so that one, I actually was curious to see how that one did while I was doing research for this. And it was more than triple the budget. It was 11 million for their budget for that one. So that just goes to show, but it also helps that it's set in the Middle Ages. So you have to have the castle set and the knights and all that sort of stuff. So obviously the budget would have been bigger anyway, but I don't know. I feel like you might even like that one a little bit more because it's a little bit goofier as far as the humor goes.
This reminded me of if this had been billed as Monty Python's Evil Dead 2, I would have been yes, because this is very much anytime they do kind of those bloody scenes in any sort of Monty Python skit, it kind of looks exactly like it does in this movie. This really should have just been Monty Python should have teamed up with Sam Raimi, and they should have just released this jointly, because this is literally what this looks like. This was a very, very enjoyable movie. It was very, very funny.
The other thing I was kind of thinking of, and I've been thinking of this because the most recent thing Sam Raimi did, he hadn't directed in 10 years or something. He had directed a few episodes of the Evil Dead show, but his last film, I think, was Oz the Great and Powerful, and then he pretty much just hadn't been doing anything. His production company, Ghost House, I believe, was producing things, but as far as directing goes, he just hadn't done it. But Disney brought him back to do Doctor Strange 2, which I've got mixed feelings about, but nothing against Sam. We kind of talked about that. Was it the King of Comedy episode? I was talking about how they kind of throw directors under the bus, and how the guy who directed Doctor Strange 1 was set to direct. So I'm annoyed about that, but that's not Sam's fault. I'm sure he probably didn't even know about that or anything. But one thing I've noticed, and I think this goes to his love of the Wizard of Oz, but one thing he does really well in all of his movies, whether it's these or whether it's Drag Me to Hell or Oz the Great and Powerful, he's very good at having witches or very creepy, haggardly kind of witch characters in his movies. And I think it's because of the Wicked Witch.
Yeah, I mean, that was literally a lot of first people's nightmares are of the Wicked Witch of the West.
Well, I don't know if you've seen the new Doctor Strange, and I'm not going to spoil it for anyone who hasn't seen it who's listening to this, but the villain in that, he definitely has some witch energy going on with that, which I thought he was doing intentionally, kind of with his stylistic stuff. But the other reason I was a little bit, and I've already talked to you about this in our messages outside of the show, but I was so shocked you'd never heard of this before, because it's certainly not as big of a franchise as Friday the 13th or Nightmare on Elm Street or Halloween or whatever. But this is a pretty beloved franchise, despite it not being as like prolific as those other ones.
Yeah, yeah.
So as far as some other fun facts to blow your mind, I've got a couple here. One, apparently, like early into knowing each other, like, and this must have been around the time he was directing Alien 2 or Aliens. He apparently gets mad if you call it Alien 2. But James Cameron actually drove up to Bill Paxton's house at like 3 a.m., honked on his horn, like got him out of bed. He's like, "Hey man, we're going to see Evil Dead 2." So this is what James Cameron was into watching. Literally this year, a new video game just came out. It's a multiplayer game. And you can play as Ash or a bunch of the characters from the TV show. And it's a multiplayer game. So it's 4 versus 1 player controlling all of the Deadites. And that literally came out, I think, in March of this year. So even this year, there is a new Evil Dead game. And I do think that they got even though he doesn't like playing Ash anymore, I do think they got Bruce Campbell to voice.
Right.
So, and I bet you didn't know there was an Evil Dead musical.
Oh my God. That sounds amazing.
It came out when we were still in college. I remember when it came out being like, is it any, like, I haven't seen it. I wonder if I could find clips of it online. I saw like photos of it, and it looks amazing. And apparently it's good. You know, it's what it should be. It's like, you know, stupid on purpose, but I'm very curious what the music is like.
All right. So because while we're talking about Bruce Campbell, I looked him up, and first off, I think it's hilarious that his YouTube handle is Groovy Bruce. Like,
I didn't even know he had a YouTube channel.
I'm sorry, not a YouTube channel. Twitter account.
Oh, gotcha.
Okay.
He should have that, because it's, you know, that's one of the famous lines from this, groovy.
So it's Groovy Bruce, and I guess somebody put out a tweet to him that said, "First time I knew I was gay was when I saw Briscoe County Jr." And Bruce Campbell responded with, "Happy to help." That's actually kind of hilarious.
He's a cool guy. You'll be happy to know this. He's directed a few things, but he actually directed a horror comedy. Oh, and I'm trying to remember what it was called. It's very funny. He plays himself in the movie, and he is like fighting like a mummy or something. Basically, it's like some small town recruits him to like protect them from some mummy or something, and it's very much like a B movie. It's in the same vein as this. Like, it's very self-aware, and the effects are very bad on purpose.
How long ago was it?
It was probably in like 2010 or something. It's hilarious. If you're curious what he's like as a director, I'd check that out. And I should probably check more of his movies out. I kind of got an inkling from that interview back in like 2018 when the show was ending that he kind of wanted to do more serious work.
Oh wait, okay. Is it My Name is Bruce?
Yes.
Okay.
It's very funny. If you like this movie, you'll like that. He directed it. He stars in it, obviously, because he's playing himself. And it's very much in the same vein as this. And as I was saying, like, I kind of feel bad for him, because I got the feeling from that interview that he really wanted to move on to more serious roles and stuff. And
well, yeah,
I'm happy that he has a following, and I'm sure he is as well. But like, it must be frustrating to like want to like act in like, I don't want to say a real movie, but you know what I mean, like a serious dramatic role, and for everyone to just, oh hey, it's Bruce Campbell, haha, groovy, you know, like I can imagine it must get kind of irritating.
You know, because I feel like, you know, actors, they go through a period where, you know, they take any role they can get, so they star in, you know, movies, you know, like this, but with the idea eventually being that you progress to more, I won't say real films, I will say more artistic films. And, you know, maybe, you know, he wanted to move on to something that's eventually more to the caliber of like Brokeback Mountain or something. But he somehow got stuck in this. And so it's kind of like, I'm sure at some point in his life, he had to make peace with and be happy with, you know, where he's at and where he's going. But the good news is he's not like one of these people who like resents,
No,
like Carrie Fisher went through a period like that where she hated Star Wars because she's like, all everybody saw me as this, but then she basically later learned on, not learned on, she learned to appreciate. I don't want to say that because it wasn't like she wasn't unappreciative, but you know what I mean. They basically learn to love the stuff that made them where they are. It's basically what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and I feel like sometimes the fan base might kind of exacerbate things. Simon Pegg wrote this interesting kind of op-ed, I guess, like this was a while ago. I want to say this was like 2014, 2015, but he was kind of like talking about how he sort of hates nerd culture because they're so, and he was getting on things that we now call like gatekeeping and things like that now. But people can just be so overbearing to the point of like you almost wish you didn't have a fan base. So
well, and I think
I'm sure he gets that a lot too, like just like really annoying people coming up to him in conventions and things. Carrie Fisher, I'm not surprised at all because of the whole Slave Leia thing. Like I'm sure she had just fucking creeps constantly whenever she would like do fan things.
Well, and then like later on, she would proudly say that she helped a generation of men find their lightsabers. She said that in several interviews. But no, exactly what
I
you're
miss
saying.
her, man. She was hilarious.
My mom got to meet her before she passed away. And she said, because she met her at like she was at a convention, so she had like an autograph. My mom goes up to get an autograph from her, and she got this autograph from her that's written in like 5 different pens. And my mom was like, this is like the mind of Carrie Fisher right here, because she'd start talking, and then she get distracted by something, I don't know, her dog or something else is going on, and then at some point she got up and talked to somebody who was walking down like the aisle, and then she came back and then picked up another pen. And so she has this signed thing from her, and it's written in like 5 different pens. But what you were saying about nerd culture though, and the way I've always kind of understood it is, and this by no means makes anything, it makes the way that it can be exclusionary or overbearing or ridiculous to that point okay, but I think basically a lot of nerd culture is by people is it's perpetuated by people who spent a lot of time on the outside of whatever in their life. And when they find something that they fit inside to, they kind of want to protect that so they can, so that they can feel like whatever the people who were in whatever they were left out in their life feel, if that makes any sense. And
no, I totally get it. And I'm like, I understand where that sort of mindset comes from. It's like, especially if you're like, if you come from a place where you're the only person that likes something, and then you go to like a convention where everyone's like, oh, I'm the biggest fan, like you almost kind of feel like you're not special anymore.
Yeah.
It's just, I'm thinking of like from the people who are featured at these conventions. Like I always just think of, again, it's become kind of more, people have become more aware of it. Like another example is like them having to put up signs at cosplay things, like not to touch people. You know what I mean?
Or it's like when they had to put up those signs at anime conventions when they had anime girls come in, they're like, okay, they will not do handshakes.
Oh God, yes.
And you know exactly what I'm talking about that people would do.
If anyone who's listening doesn't know, just feel free to Google it. You will be immediately regretting that decision. But I guess 2 questions I have for you. 1, had you actually seen a horror comedy before? And if so, what? And 2, since this one did work for you, why do you think this one worked where others didn't?
Okay, so first off, do you consider Beetlejuice a horror comedy?
Yes, actually.
Okay, so that's a cool movie. I'm trying to think of what I would consider what I've seen that works like a horror comedy. So there's like, I'm thinking Beetlejuice, like Death Becomes Her. We did that last year.
Yep.
That was a horror comedy. I guess technically Sacred Deer, was that what it is? Killing of a Sacred Deer?
Dark comedy. I wouldn't really call it, like, it definitely was pretty messed up, but I don't know if I'd really call it straight horror. But I'm just curious, because again, I'm going off of something you said years ago, but I'm curious where you got that.
I wish I knew what episode I had said that in so that I could be like, this is why I said that.
I wish I remembered. Now you can go back through our logs and figure out where you said it, because I'm pretty sure you said it on the mic, so I'm sure it's somewhere.
I hope this wasn't a hot mic. I hope this wasn't a hot mic moment.
Hot mic moment. Who's Mike and how's he so hot? No,
well, he's
but so
played
like
by Billy Gardell. I'm just kidding.
I mean, you named like so Death Becomes Her. Well, I guess you had seen it before, but I had never seen it. So like I don't know, like maybe you have no idea what was going through your mind years ago, but I'm just curious why you felt that way in the moment and why at least this one worked where maybe Beetlejuice didn't. Although you said you liked Beetlejuice, so again, now I'm curious why you said it at all.
Right. Okay. So what I'm assuming is the reason why I said that in that time period is I am very, very sensitive. Well, in general, I'm very sensitive. That.
Gotcha.
And particularly with death and dismemberment.
Gotcha. Oh, you know what? You know what I think maybe you were bringing it up for? There was that that zombie musical that you were not a big fan of. What was it called? Anna and the Apocalypse?
Anna and the Apocalypse. This is probably... Okay, if that's the case, it was not on mic. Unless it was, because maybe we talked about something else. But that's probably what I was talking about where it doesn't work. Because for me, and I'm not trying to put myself on some weird level or anything, but I feel people, and I literally will put myself in the position of a character if I get a chance to learn enough about them. And so to me, a lot of the stuff that's supposed to be kind of like to me in movies like that, like let's say Anna and the Apocalypse, the reason it didn't work is because to me the comedy doesn't outweigh the tragedy of what's going on, if that makes sense.
No, I got you.
And this,
well, and we've talked about it.
I think you finally watch it and you're like, seriously, this is what had you depressed for weeks.
I will say this: I didn't think it was that funny, so didn't have that much going for it. That was okay, honestly. Like I remember some people were saying it was like kind of a hidden gem that year, and because of what you saying you didn't like it, it kind of got me morbidly curious to see, well, how bad's the ending? And then, but no, I know what you mean. We talked about this way back when we reviewed Terminator 2 last year.
Yeah.
Like whenever there's like mass casualties in movies, you feel that. So I'm guessing the fact that you haven't seen Tucker and Dale, I'm guessing you just haven't seen a lot of horror comedies.
Like this one, I don't know. This one was just different. And I'm trying to figure out what I mean,
well, it's like, again, if you're taking it from the Three Stooges mindset, when Curly gets bashed in the head by Moe, you're not thinking, oh, that must have hurt. Like you're thinking, oh, it was funny that he just got hit in the head. Like something about the tone, I think, kind of changes it. It's not even just that these are like caricature characters. Yeah. I think it's also just kind of the way that the performance is done. Because, again, it's kind of... Slapstick's interesting because it's really hard to describe what's funny about it. You know what I mean? Like when you describe like a Three Stooges gag to someone, it's like, oh, it's funny because they got hurt.
Yeah, it's kind of like why America's Funniest Home Videos, if you really think about them, it's just a lot of people being, injured in painful ways. Like, why is that hilarious to watch? It's kind of, I think, it's kind of along the same lines. And, I guess maybe with this movie, what was different for me about this is since it was a group of people that were all closely involved to the plot, there was no collateral damage, like at all. There was no, what do I call, there was no emotional attachment really built for any of the characters, which is why I found this kind of hilarious.
I think there's also kind of a superhero angle with Ash, especially in the later bits of the series, because he's almost kind of a superhero character with his chainsaw arm and his boomstick, as he calls it.
That's just kind of cool. And if this had been a movie that had tried to, like Anna and the Apocalypse tried to also lean into the drama more, like if we had him like scenes of like if it was goofy like this, but then in between we had scenes of him lamenting how he can't do his favorite hobby anymore or support himself because he didn't have a hand or something like that. To me, that would have made this very unfunny. You know what I mean?
The extended lore makes it even funnier. There's like this video game character. I feel like you might even be familiar. Duke Nukem. Have you heard of that character?
I have not. You know me, I have heard of nothing. I'm the most embarrassing film slash TV fan ever.
So this video game character is super out of date, but he got famous for like quoting a lot of famous movies, like action movies. And I just find it funny that a bunch of the quotes he's said are from Ash. Like he says things like from They Live and stuff, but like he says things like groovy in Army of Darkness. There's a line where Ash says "Hail to the King, baby." And despite this being kind of a horror comedy thing, there is like a bit of action to it. Like Ash is almost kind of an action hero on top of this being like a Halloween spooky kind of movie. It's really just like a mixing pot of a bunch of different things. I really like whichever crew member called it a funhouse movie, because that's actually kind of a great descriptor for what this is, because it's just fun. This is what James Cameron goes to see with Bill Paxton at 3 a.m. This is just like a fun movie.
Rest in peace, Bill Paxton.
But yeah, I guess we're kind of at that point. Obviously, everyone knows I liked this. For a formal rating out of 4 stars or four glasses of whiskey, for me it's a 3.5. How about you?
I'm gonna give this a 3 out of 4 pitchers of sweet tea. This was a pretty solid comedy with like lots of, I mean, it's a horror comedy. There's lots of, if you're a fan of horror, you'll probably find a lot of like, there's probably a lot of things that are in this movie that have probably either annoyed you about horror films or something that you've seen or something along the lines. And it's kind of all put in here, and it's just, it's so just ridiculously fun. Like whenever I see people like reading reviews where they talk about, oh, it was, gruesome, but gleefully fun. And I've seen them and I'm like, this is not gleefully fun. What are you talking about? This I found gleefully fun. And it's just a movie that you're kind of also just watching like, what did I just watch? But in a good way. It's very dumb in a good way. It sounds like I'm saying bad things, but because this is all intentional, that's why I'm saying this.
Again, you're not wrong. No one who even works on this movie would disagree with you. In fact, like again, in the bonus material I was watching to prepare for this, a lot of the actors, this was like they'd never really done horror before, and I think it was the lead actress and the guy who was playing her boyfriend were like flying to North Carolina together, and they were on the same plane.
Right.
And he was just like, "Have you read this script? This is weird, right?"
There's I just thought of something that I also thought was kind of hilarious. And I think this, and I'm pretty sure this is done on purpose. I could be wrong. It most likely was. But the fact that they totally played up the continuity errors on purpose. Like, I thought that was pretty hilarious. Like, the big one that I remember is when the hillbilly guy is getting eaten in the cellar. And she just gets sprayed with just gallons and gallons of blood. And then she gets up from there, and then we cut to the shot of her getting up, and she just has like a little bit of blood on her shirt. I'm like, seriously? And I'm like, some of it might have actually been. So they didn't particularly care about the MPAA,
but they were kind of trying to not get banned this time. So you'll notice in some bits the blood is green, sometimes it's black, sometimes like they made the blood different colors in every like gory thing to kind of mess with them a little bit. And also they did have to cut down on, like, there's a bit when Ash chops the guy to death where like they would have had him missing a part of his head and still coming for Ash, but they cut that out. There was like a bit after he chopped him up where like all of the bits were on the floor like squirming, and they cut that out. So some of it might actually just be like in the editing process they screwed something up. But
I think it worked. I think it works to the film. I think it works to the film's benefit because, like I said, it seems like they took like a lot of just slasher tropes or horror movie tropes or however you want to phrase it, and just, amplified them. It made them hilarious. And so that's why
I agree.
That's kind of why I'm like, okay, they were just amplifying the fact that a lot of these slasher films had continuity errors, because it happens quite a few times in the movie. And I found it kind of like a fun little Easter egg. Find the continuity errors for more laughs.
I agree. And also like with my obviously with my final rating, a lot of it is my own personal opinion, but part of the reason I'm giving it a 3.5 instead of 3, because I know this might not be for everybody, but it's like I've seen this with a few people, and not just you, but like other people who aren't necessarily into like scary stuff. Most people laugh at this movie when they see it. You know what I mean?
was laughing.
Like I feel exactly like I feel like this is just so ridiculous that there's nothing else you would be able to do but just enjoy it.
Yeah.
Like obviously you probably don't want to show this to a very young kid because it might still scare them. You know, it's kind of like, it's like Bruce Campbell's kids versus his co-star kids. You know, you show this to one kid, they'll be like, ooh, that's cool. And you show it to another kid, they'll be traumatized for months. So it's...
Oh, I just thought of another thing why this one works for me. It doesn't fetishize the kill, if that makes sense.
Yeah, also, that is kind of a good point, too, because there's not a lot of male gazy stuff with the female actors. There's not
the one thing with her dancing in her panties at the beginning, I just thought that was just because that's what they always do with these women in these horror films. Like I said, it just seemed like they took a lot of horror movie tropes, just amplified them to ridiculous amounts.
It's not as, especially again, comparing this to what was super popular at the time, the slasher films, those really tried to get as much nudity as possible because a lot of it was, you know, like horny teenagers going to see the movie.
Yeah.
But yeah, she's dancing around in like a jersey in her panties, but you're not really like focusing in on her butt or anything. And even when she's like fully nude as a corpse, it's one of those things where if you thought that was hot, I'd probably kind of judge you a little bit. So it's got that going for it.
The people who thought that was hot were the same people who thought the bathtub lady was hot.
Right?
In The Shining. No, but like I said, but you know, besides it doesn't have any male gaze, like I said, it doesn't fetishize the kills. And that seems to be a big thing in horror. They kind of like want to like really... or not in horror, like I guess in some horror and some slasher, they really kind of like they do the up close shots of the kill and cutting into things, and they try to make it, you know, basically like to the point to where people put in reviews, if you're looking for great kills, this is the movie to see. I like movies that have violence in them, but I never go, yes, I'm watching this for the kills. Like to me, that's just sad.
Some of that was like a myth. I mean, around this time last year, we did Friday the 13th, and we kind of talked about how that was overblown as far as how violent it was.
Oh yeah, that was not violent.
And a lot of the best slasher films also kind of had an element of comedy. We've talked about one Friday the 13th film and one Nightmare on Elm Street film. But one thing you can kind of hopefully remember from both of those is like the kills were almost kind of like a joke.
Yeah.
You know, like in different ways. Like Jason's was, well, you know, the one that we saw, it wasn't technically Jason, but in all of the sequels and stuff, he's very like blunt and funny the way that he kills them. It's usually not super prolonged. It's just kind of, it's hard to explain. Maybe we'll do a sequel of one of those later on. But it's there is an element of comedy in slashers as well. Like I feel like it's not to the point where I'd call them horror comedies like this.
Yeah.
But there is a bit of self-awareness to how ridiculous what you're being entertained by is. You know what I mean? I feel like where it really got bad was sort of in the 2000s, the genre quote unquote torture porn was really big, and that's movies like Hostel and Saw and stuff. And I like the Saw movies, but I would kind of agree that those are the ones where it's a lot harder to sit through.
Yeah.
There's not really an element of comedy in a lot of the stuff going on. There sort of was in the Hostel movies, but it definitely would have been off-putting to some people. But yeah, that's like something I feel doesn't get talked about enough about like 80s horror is a lot of it was very tongue-in-cheek and silly.
Well, like so far what you showed me of like 80s horror, you know, sometimes I'm like, this is a little too graphic for me. But to me, it was never like, oh my God, this is just, I cannot believe somebody would sit through and watch this. I've been like, you know, like, because to me, it's just like, this might be too graphic for me. That's pretty much it.
As I said, man, if you liked this, there is, you know, not as much as some other franchises, but you do have hours of entertainment. I can definitely say if you liked this, you'll like the TV show. You've got Yes, it is meant to be funny, just like this, and the effects are a little bit better. And he's got a whole team now. Like so, you find this out in the later series. But so his day job when he wasn't vacationing in the cabin is he's the manager at what is essentially a Kmart.
Yeah.
So after he returns from his adventures, he goes back to being, and he's basically a loser. Like he lives in a trailer, and he's like a Kmart manager, and he's got a hook for a hand because he can't walk around with a chainsaw all the time. And when the demons attack, it's him and his two employees going off and fighting the demons, and that's like the TV show. And his sidekick actually becomes a pretty cool character. His assistant manager, he finds out that he comes from a long line of brujos, like Mexican witches.
Yes,
so he's a playable character in the Evil Dead. Like pretty much the game that just came out, you can play as like all of the characters from the TV show plus a few from the series. So it's like I feel like everyone would just be fighting to play Ash, but if you're a fan, like from my understanding, there's like a whole bunch of characters with their own quirks.
Well, first off, yes, you're right. It's a Mexican witch. I'm looking at my book on my paranormal shelf called American Brujeria that I got that tells you how to practice Mexican magic.
There you go.
But yeah, I was like, and I had a point. What was my point? We were just talking.
You like this series, and you're going to binge through the whole rest of it. And I have a feeling you're going to like Army of Darkness best because it's goofy and it's PG-13.
I was gonna say, so we're talking about that. We were talking about what were we talking about right before then? Oh, this is going to bother me.
Oh, we were talking about fetishizing the kill.
Oh yes. Well, this is what I was going to say. The best recent example I can think of where they do that. And it's not exactly torture porn, but they really do kind of focus on let's look at and examine the goriness as much as possible. But like to me, there's a difference between like this kind of gore that we saw in Evil Dead 2 and then like what gore is now, where they try to make it realistic and they have like intestine scene stuff. Was the latest. I didn't see it, but I was reading what people were saying. The latest Texas Chainsaw Massacre that came out.
Oh, I still need to see it. You showed me the trailer, and my goodness, that made me cringe.
Well, everybody said like it was terrible, but it had such great kills in it, and that disturbs me when I hear people say that.
So it's weird that they're saying that because that was never what was good. We should review it in the future. There's so much to say about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but it's like, so I'm assuming, I need to see it because I'm assuming what they mean is that the kills are like very over the top and silly, because that's usually what slasher fans are talking about, oh, it was super funny when Freddy Krueger slammed her head into a TV and said, "Welcome to primetime, bitch." That's what I'm guessing they're saying. And from that trailer you sent me months and months ago, it looked like they were going for silly, like where I remember there was someone talking to Leatherface saying like, "Oh, they're going to cancel you" or something. And it's like, that's what made me cringe. But it also is like, okay, this is probably trying to be funny. It's failing, but
well, basically, I think that scene, because from what I read, that scene is followed up with an immediate massacre of all these young adults, basically almost children, on this bus being massacred by Leatherface. And people say, "Oh, that's a great scene. It's so bloody and it's so gory." And I'm like, "Oh my God." That's the kind of stuff that bothers me. And I'm just like,
I need to see it. And the thing about we should review it in the future, but when I'm talking about like franchises that are solid or at least like dependably like decent most of the time versus ones that are train wrecks, Texas Chainsaw Massacre is like Poltergeist. The first one was a classic, and then they just had no idea what to do with it and just kept failing worse and worse at everyone. I know a lot of people liked the one from the 2000s.
But like, was Texas Chainsaw Massacre also like Poltergeist, where it was kind of just originally it was basically conceived as a standalone movie, and because it was good, they wanted to make a bunch more?
I'll save my thoughts for when we review it in the future.
Okay, well, it better be the original one and not this new one.
No, we're going to watch the original one.
Protesting the new one. Well, not protesting.
No, we're not.
Choosing not to watch
it. We're not going to watch that trash unless you guys tweet at us and let us know, because we will review stuff if you want us to review it. But yeah, so this was a good one. I'm glad you enjoyed it. But thank you guys for tuning in and listening to us talk about this goofy movie. And hope you guys have had a great October.
But before we go away, I have a quick little thing I'd like to say. So
do it.
Upon
Go off, girl.
upon
Preach.
Okay, stop. You're making me laugh. Upon further review of Poltergeist, I would like to retract my original rating. You knew this was coming. My original rating of Poltergeist, and I would like to give it 3 out of 4 pitchers of sweet tea. And I think maybe
Would you
I don't
give
know
it
if
again? Did you give it like a
I watched
1.5 or something?
I think you give it like 1.5 or 2 or something, or like a low 2 or something like that.
2 is forgivable. Like if it wasn't your thing, I know you've enjoyed it since rewatching it, but if it was a 2, that wouldn't be that offensive. Like it's just not your cup of tea. But a 1.5, I do think you should change that.
So I am retracting whatever it is, and I can't remember what it is right now because I don't have my notebook in front of me. My previous ratings, and I want to make it a 3. And I watched it. I don't know if I was just in the wrong state of mind or whatever when I first watched it, but it is such a good movie after I watched it the second time. And it really is. And, one of my, at least I said it earlier in this podcast, I'm a sucker for love stories. Poltergeist really is a love story, not like a romantic love story, but a story of family love. And it's like, it really is a story of love conquers all. And I'm like, how did I miss that the first time watching this? So like I said,
you are into paranormal stuff, so the fact that it wasn't like getting into the nitty gritty, I think, kind of, and also again, like you like things like The Exorcist, where it's very serious. Like again, like when I was reviewing it last episode, it's like you kind of have to go in knowing this is like a Spielberg adventure movie. Yeah, like it is a ghost story and it's got paranormal stuff, but it's kind of in the same vein of those movies he was making at the time, where it's much more about the thrill of, what's going on and what kind of spooky stuff's going to happen.
And once I really kind of put myself in the place of the family, like if I was in that, I think I would know as little as they do, or probably less, as to what's going on. But just doing what I can to get my family back. I do still kind of question them keeping the other kid around for as long as they did. But other than, I would have been like, y'all are leaving now. No, sorry. But yeah, I want to give it 3 out of 4. I would like to apologize to, oh my God, what is the name of the director? What is the name of the director?
You're so dramatic. It's Tobe Hooper. It's the same director as Texas Chainsaw.
I know, we're talking about this. I would like to personally apologize to Tobe Hooper if my previous comment and review offended you. You did a fantastic job on this, and I just didn't appreciate it 2 weeks ago.
You should send, if he's on Twitter, you should send both of these reviews, like links to him on Twitter, one after the other, just so the...
Just be like, Tobe Hooper, please listen to my review, and then please listen to my apology immediately following it. But yes, it's a fabulous film. And like I said, I just wanted to fix that because I felt really bad about that review. I really did. And it's actually, it's one that I went, and I forgot to mention this, last episode, but it was this year is the 40th anniversary of Poltergeist coming out. But I went out and purchased, the brand new 40th anniversary. I loved it that much. But yeah, so with that in mind, you want to close us out? You want to start closing us out again, Whiskey?
As I was saying, thanks for stopping by, guys. Thanks for listening. Thanks for checking in. Please tweet at us or yell at us on any one of our social media handles if you want us to review something. If this is your first episode and you liked listening to us rattle on about movies, we've got a whole backlog of episodes on Spotify, on Apple, on YouTube. If for some reason you're listening to us on there, feel free to check us out, leave us a comment, all that stuff. But we have been the TV people keeping it Kino.
Oh my God. And suck it, Scorsese.
Peace.
Bye. Reels on the Rocks is a production of La Prince Laboratories. It is produced by Alejandro Castillo, edited by Andy Reisfeld, and features original artwork by Ace Esparza and original music by Pat Mars. Follow us on Twitter at Reels on the Rocks, and tweet at us with any movies or topics you'd like us to discuss in the future.